This episode of Harvey Brownstone Interviews is brought to you by the Harvey Brownstone Talk Show Blend Coffee, available at hollywoodblends.com. Everyone's saying it's the best coffee they've ever tasted. Why not give it a try and see for yourself?
Hello, everyone. I'm Harvey Brownstone, and today's guest is a multi-award winning and beloved actress who's brought us dozens of unforgettable performances in a monumental career spanning 6 decades. On Broadway, she has twice been nominated for Tony Awards for her performances in Ulysses in Nighttown and The Ferryman. On the big screen, she captivated the whole world with her tour de force multi-character performances in James Joyce's Women, which she also wrote and produced. You've also seen her in many great movies, including Ulysses, Youngblood, Some Mother's Son, Divine Secrets of the Ya-Ya Sisterhood, Transamerica, The Payback, Kill the Irishman, Life's a Breeze, Four Mothers, Waking Ned Devine, for which she and her fellow cast members were nominated for a Screen Actors Guild Award for Best Ensemble, and the others, for which she won a Saturn Award and received a Satellite Award nomination. On television, our guest won an Emmy Award for her performance in the miniseries Rich Man, Poor Man, and she received another Emmy Award nomination for Outstanding Lead Actress in a Drama Series for her portrayal of Aunt Molly Culhane in How the West Was Won. She played the mysterious Eloise Hawking in Lost. She was Rose Caffey in Brotherhood. She was Nikki in Defiance. She was Carol Noonan in Smother. And she's guest starred in dozens of classic TV shows going all the way back to Bonanza, Gunsmoke, and Marcus Welby, all the way up to Cagney and Lacey, Murder, She Wrote, Nip Tuck, and Law and Order SVU. And as all you Trekkies out there know, our guest has a significant connection with Star Trek. She played Anina Tandro in Star Trek Deep Space Nine. She was Dr. Juliana Tainer in Star Trek The Next Generation. And she played Vulcan Ambassador Valar in Star Trek Enterprise. And she's co-starred in some wonderful TV movies and miniseries, including Some Women, The Picture of Dorian Gray, The Legend of Lizzie Borden, Mary White, A Winner Never Quits, Kings in Grass Castles, Three Wise Women, Redwater, and many, many more. Our guest has been nominated for 6 Irish Film and Television Awards, and she won 2 for her performances in Transamerica and The Guard, in addition to receiving a Lifetime Achievement Award in 2012 from the Irish Film and Television Academy. She's also a recipient of the Richard Harris Outstanding Talent Award and the Maureen O'Hara Award, and in 2008, our guest received an honorary doctorate from the University of Galway in her native Ireland. I'm delighted and honored to welcome the incomparable Fionnula Flanagan to our show. Miss Flanagan, thank you so much for being here.
Oh, thank you. What an introduction. My goodness. Thank you.
What goes through your mind when you hear all of those credits and achievements?
Well, I think, first of all, are you sure? Are you absolutely sure that I did all of those? It seems like, how could I have done all of those in just a few years? But I take it that you've done your research. You certainly have.
I sure have, and it's easy to do. I'm quite an admirer of your work. I want to start by pointing out that you're one of the world's foremost interpreters of James Joyce, who was without question one of the greatest writers in the English language. Your performances in Ulysses and James Joyce's Women, and of course on Broadway and Ulysses in Nighttown, are truly iconic. Can you please explain to me how your parents instilled in you from such a young age a great respect and admiration for James Joyce?
Well, it's very simple. I went to school in Eccles Street. My high school, if you will, was there. And if anyone had asked me, where do the Joyces live or where do the Blooms live, I would have pointed to the house because it's right there in the book. To me, so little had changed at that time in Dublin that it was very like, the names of shops, etc. Very, very like, and the names of the cemetery and the names of burial places, etc. All was the same. So as the books. So it was very simple.
And familiar to you already.
Oh, very familiar, yes. And also, my father was a huge Joyce fan. I mean, I really believed that he knew Joyce. The way he spoke about him, he would say, as Joyce said this, etc. So I thought, well, it must be somebody that he knew. So I wasn't intimidated from the get-go, which was great.
When you first came to America, you did a lot of television work. You were in two Broadway shows. You eventually broke into the movies. Was living and working in America, and especially Hollywood, a big adjustment for you after moving there from Ireland?
Oh, yes, very much so. Also, the business was very different. If you, at that time when I first came to Hollywood, if you worked in television, you could not work in the movies. You just simply didn't have access, and vice versa. And it wasn't until the long forms came along, that changed everything. Everybody wanted to do television then because it meant, 6 or 8 episodes of something. So that changed everything.
In 1969, you were directed by the legendary John Huston in Sinful Davy. What was it like working with him?
Well, he didn't really want to do the movie. And so they had a job getting him out of his trailer every day. They did. And he was a lovely man. He was very intimidating to me at any rate. I was young. I was totally intimidated by him, but he was charming to everyone, really charming to everyone. And that was a good movie that was based on the diary of an actual Scottish highwayman. And so a lot of the incidents in it were true.
I'm surprised he didn't want to make the movie because it's really a very, very good film.
Well, he was more interested in at the time in doing, let's see, The Bridge on the River Kwai was something that his producer had produced, and so he was interested in that sort of film. And really wasn't interested very much in Sinful Davy, but we had a lot of fun doing that.
Another interesting director you had in 2007 was Anthony Hopkins, who directed you in Slipstream, which he also wrote and starred in. What was he like
Yeah.
as a director?
Well, he was on the very first day of shooting, and we were shooting all over around Palm Springs, etc. And on the very first day of shooting, he managed to break his leg. So, yes, so he spent the rest of the time in a wheelchair and directed from a wheelchair. And that was very difficult for him, of course. And everywhere we went on that film, it was though there was a curse on us because we would leave one location and then it would burn down the next day or it would be flooded, etc. So it was one of those extraordinary, we felt all the time that we were running to finish the film.
It gives you a whole different perspective. Hearing that, I feel like to go back and watch it again.
Yes. Oh, you should. Yeah.
I have to mention yet another famous actor who directed you on the stage in James Joyce's Women and Ulysses in Nighttown, the Penguin himself, Burgess Meredith. Now, I have to confess to you, Miss Flanagan, I've heard that although he really understood how to stage a Joyce production, he could be quite mercurial in his temperament. What was he like
Yeah.
to work with?
He could be quite mercurial. I miss him still. He meant so much to me, and he was my mentor from the time when I wrote James Joyce's Women. I went to him and I read it to him, and I asked him would he direct it, and he said yes, of course. And he said it in a way that, do you even need to ask, sort of thing. So therein began really an apprenticeship for me that was extraordinary. I learned so much from him, and he had directed me in Ulysses in Nighttown, which of course was an adaptation by Marjorie Barkington on the Nighttown chapter from Ulysses. And he was Oh, he could be quite cross at times. He really could be, and would get very ratty is the best way to explain it. When the actors weren't delivering what they were supposed to deliver.
Well, you've worked with so many great directors: Sam Mendes, Leo Pan, Lance Daly. What do you consider to be the attributes of a good director?
I think first of all is letting the actors do the exploration of the text. That's terribly important, and letting the actors do their job, do their work in revealing what they find in the text. And it isn't always what the director wants to have revealed, but that's very valuable, very valuable. Working with Sam Mendes was really something else. I had to sing in that production. I had to sing 5 songs. And I said to him at one point early on, you know, these poems that are put to music, I know the poems, so couldn't I just recite them? And he said, no, you'll sing them. And that was pretty terrifying for me. I had never sung on stage before, and so that was pretty frightening. And I remember I went down into the basement in the theatre, in the Jacobs Theatre, to rehearse them with the musical director. And he said to me, so what's your key? And I said, I don't know. What don't you know?
So, would you have agreed to take on the role if you had known you were going to be required to sing?
Well, actors are ruthless and they will do anything to do a part. And so I think he asked me when we first met, I think he asked me, you do sing, don't you? So I of course agreed. I was never going to contradict the director.
Well, thank heavens you did, because look at the performance you turned in. Now, I must mention, Miss Flanagan, in 1982, you played Molly Brown in Voyager from the Unknown. And the next year, you got to play her again in a TV series called Voyagers. And as you know, before you took on the role, Molly Brown had already been portrayed by some wonderful actresses like Thelma Ritter, Debbie Reynolds, Cloris Leachman, Tucker McGuire, Tammy Grimes. Were you influenced by any of those performances?
No, I was totally intimidated. I mean, so many of those women, I admire them. I really do admire their work, and some of them are dead now, but actors never die. Your performance keeps on going and going. And so I was intimidated because I thought, how can I possibly match them? It wasn't how can I outshine them, or it was how can I match them?
Were any of the performances ones that you particularly focused on to try to maybe pick up some tips?
Well, I think Thelma Ritter's performance was so really colorful, and that I did watch. I so admired her anyway, and was intimidated because I thought I'll never be able to do what she does. But there you are.
And you got to do it twice.
Yes, I did. Please call me Fionnula. Don't keep
Oh,
calling me Miss Flanagan.
I definitely will. Thank you. So, Fionnula, in 1991, you co starred with Christopher Reeve in a TV movie called Death Dreams. And then 4 years later, he had that catastrophic accident. I'm so glad you had the chance to work with him. I heard he was a wonderful guy.
Yes, he was quite wonderful, and I was just devastated when I heard what had happened to him and the accident that he had. And first of all, he was very tall. And, normally it's very difficult I'm 5'1", and it's very difficult to work with someone who's that tall. But he was lovely and very, very good looking, very good looking. He had, of course, played Clark Kent originally, done that, and so he was lovely. He was just lovely.
Yeah, what a wonderful person. Now, this next question, I have to confess, comes from my program director, Robert Monaghan, who's a huge fan of your 2002 movie, Divine Secrets of the Ya-Ya Sisterhood. He says it's one of the world's best feel-good films, and I agree. And what a cast. Maggie Smith, Ellen Burstyn, Sandra Bullock, James Garner. Did you have a lot
Yeah.
of fun on that set?
Yes, particularly jumping over the crocodiles that were asleep on the set. We had to go down to the lake on certain scenes, and that entailed jumping over the crocodiles as they were snoozing on the. And I've never done that before, so I feel I should put it on my resume: crocodile jumping. But yes, Maggie and I became good friends after that, and yes, it was great fun to do the Ya-Ya's. And I thought it was a very good film. It was written originally and it was directed by Callie Courey, who wrote Thelma and Louise, but they wouldn't let her direct that at the time, and which was a great shame. But she held out and directed this one. And she she did the adaptation of the script when we were there on the floor. Yes, my goodness, that's a long time ago.
Yeah, but it's a film that continues to bring so much enjoyment to people. I also want to mention in 2005, you played Felicity Huffman's mother in a brilliant movie called Transamerica, which was groundbreaking because it featured a transgender character in the lead role. Were you
Yes.
and your fellow cast members sensitized and aware while you were making the movie about the impact that the movie would have on the LGBTQ community?
No, we had no idea. And we had a lot of LGBTQ members who played smaller roles in the film. And it was a picture that brought attention to the pain and the suffering that and it's called going shadow, or going, that they don't people who are LGBTQ have to keep a low profile, and which is a shame because so many of them were wonderful actors. And yeah, I so enjoyed that. And I thought Felicity deserved the Oscar for that. She should have had the Oscar for it. But, them's the breaks, as they say.
I totally agree. The movie was really transformative in the way that it presented the whole dynamic of being transgendered to the world
Yes,
in a way we'd never seen. I'm gay, and even I had never really understood the pain, the
really.
anguish, the marginalization, the feeling of being disenfranchised that came through in that movie. And I'm so proud, along with being a crocodile jumper. I'm so happy you can put that movie on your resume.
Me too. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Now, of course, for all those Star Trek fans out there, Fionnula, as I mentioned in my introduction, you've appeared in 3 different Star Trek series. And I must say, you surprised us all when Dr. Juliana Taylor played the violin with Data, her android son, in Star Trek The Next Generation. Were you actually playing the violin in that scene?
Actually, in the long shot, I was playing the violin, and yes, and my co-star was also playing the flute. And but then for the close-ups, if I tell you how it's done, how Hollywood does it, because I was so terrified I couldn't, I haven't a note of music in my body, and so I just abandoned the script and just practiced the violin. And I think it was The Girl with the Flaxen Hair we had to play, or it was a piece by Debussy anyway. So the director said to me, "All I need is for you to play the first 8 bars for the long shot." And I said, "Okay." And thinking I'm dying inside because when we get to the close up, people will see that I don't know how to move my fingers on the strings or whatever. And Brent equally was terrified because he doesn't, he hasn't the faintest idea, he can't even play the comb. And so anyway, the door opens onto the soundstage, and in walk 2 small people, two who are totally dressed as we are, And they came towards us and they said, put your hands behind you, which I did. I put my arms behind me like that. And then the woman who she got behind me and she put her arms through my hands like that, through my arms, and she held the violin. And similarly for Brent, you know, so we weren't even holding the instruments. And so all we had to do was look passionately at each other. Mother and son finally found each other in space. I don't know how the crew didn't fall about laughing, because it was really funny. But that's how it's done in Hollywood. You get the shot, no matter how.
It sounds like an episode of I Love Lucy.
Yes, it was quite. Yes.
How does it feel, Fionnula, when Star Trek fans come up to you and tell you how much your performances mean to them?
Well, we do it for the audience, at least I do it for the audience. It's so gratifying when people say, I really like your work, or I liked such and such a performance. Mind you, people have named things that I haven't even been in and thanked me for that. So I was told a long time ago, you just say thank you very much. And so I do.
That's hilarious. What do they think that you're Judi Dench or Helen Mirren?
No, they just assume there was one man who said to me, I said I wasn't in that, and whatever it was a movie of the week or something. He had the cast list, and my name is not on it, but that didn't stop him. He was determined. So, and then I've had people come up to me at the airport in Hawaii. That's where Lost was shot. And so people ran up to me and grabbed my arm and said, wait a minute, is that how it's going to end? As though I had written it, but I hadn't, of course. And people were very upset that all the characters were dead, supposedly. Anyway, that was great fun to do. It was fun to do.
Well, I must tell you, now that you've mentioned Lost, I was a faithful viewer. I never missed an episode. It's the only TV series I've ever watched from beginning to end that I'm quite sure I never fully understood. Now, you were in seasons 3, 5, and 6, which in my opinion got progressively confusing. So I have to ask you, did you understand what was really going on in that show?
No, of course not. And then, so you'd take the script and you'd look and you'd say, I wonder who these people are. So you'd go over and ask another actor, who are these people? And he or she would say, oh, you better ask so and so because I wasn't in that season, you know. And so nobody really knew what was going on. And then there was the smoke monster, who appeared. I don't know if you saw any of those episodes. He would just sort of appear in the jungle. And then there was a polar bear who appeared in the jungle. And all of this was shot in Hawaii. But it was great fun to do, I have to say.
Well, I must tell you, when I told all my friends that Eloise Hawking was going to appear on my show, they all said to me, oh, ask her, did Eloise Hawking know? And I'm thinking, I don't even know what they're referring to. Do you?
Know everything. Yes, know everything. I asked that very same question to the director, who was wonderful. He was a stage director, and anyway, he did most of them. And I said, wait a minute. I said, this would indicate that she knows everything that's gone before. She does, he said. I said, and she knows what's going to happen? She does. So she is the person who knew everything, start to finish. But of course, you can't let on that you do. You have to play it as though it's all new to you. So I think that's why they gave me that, that pendulum to jump over. And I'm wearing 3-inch heels, and I have to jump over the pendulum when it swings around in that last episode where I'm explaining things to the crew, anybody who will listen. Yes, it was very strange.
Yes, that
Very
was the
strange.
acting equivalent of a Rubik's Cube, let me tell you. I also want to mention an incredibly moving film you made last year called Four Mothers. You played a
Oh,
woman who had a stroke and lost the ability to speak, and your character was based on the mother of the writer and director, Darren Thornton. How
yes.
difficult was that for you to not use your main instrument, your voice?
Very difficult, very difficult. I had to suppress that at every minute because the urge to speak. And I have to say that it was probably the most difficult thing I've ever done was to, apart from singing, which was pretty difficult, but to suppress one's instrument, is extremely difficult. And I think that I said to Darren at the time when he had written this and sent it to me, and I said, and he told me that it was based upon his own mother, their own mother, and who had had a stroke. And I said, well, first of all, I said, you got to know that I cannot play your mother. I can't recreate your mother on screen. I can only play the mother that's inside me, you know. And so he said yes, that would be okay, but I would have to use this little computer in order to speak. And I said, well, we're going to have a problem with that because first of all, I'm not very speedy on the computer, and so by the time I would tap everything out, I said the audience isn't going to wait for that. And so he had a way round it anyway. So, and it worked. Strangely enough, it did work. But yes, all of those, and I thought that James McArdle was marvelous in that. He played my son, and he was just wonderful. And it gave me an insight into just the situation that people have to go through when there's a single carer, a son or a daughter, but in this case it was a son who had to look after his mother and at the same time try and find a way to work, to write. It was very difficult. So it gave me an insight into that and made me much more sympathetic to situations where people have a lot to cope with.
Oh, absolutely. I have to say to our viewers, if you did not see Four Mothers, it's a movie you really should see. Fionnula, you've played a lot of mothers throughout your career. You've talked about playing the mother within you. Do you sometimes channel your own mom?
Yes, I think I do channel her. I'm not a mother myself. I'm a wicked stepmother, as they say. And I have two marvelous stepsons, wonderful, Matthew and Turlock, wonderful people. And my husband is dead. So, uh, yes, but
Yeah,
it was a good time.
absolutely. And I'm sure that he's looking down upon you and grateful that you're there for his children.
I hope so.
We talked about your Tony nominated performance as Aunt Maggie Faraway on Broadway and The Ferryman. It was such a marathon. I mean, the show's over 3 hours. You were on the stage longer than anyone else, from what I recall. Were there times during the run of that show when you asked yourself, why do I want to work this hard when I could be making more money and working nowhere near as hard in a movie or a TV show?
Well, the answer to that is the director. You know, Sam Mendes was wonderful and wonderful to me and very supportive. And so that's the answer to that. I have to say that I fell asleep one night I had to sit in the wheelchair forever. And so one night I actually fell asleep. And then Bridge Brennan, who played it in London, she told me that she fell asleep twice, but I only fell asleep once. And I woke up and I'm supposed to wake up and I'm supposed to sing. And so I wake up and Dervla Malloy and yeah, two actors are downstage in one and they're talking to each other. And I think, wonder what they're saying. They were improvising until I woke up. Yes. And the
That's
stage manager was,
hilarious.
yes, she was just about to drop the curtain on us, but it didn't come to that.
When you play a role on stage for an extended period of time, do you delve deeper and deeper into the character and alter your performance as time goes by?
Yes, actually, the audience will alter it for you because each audience is different. And the contract that you make with them in the first 10 seconds on stage is so important, and you know then how it's going to be, whether it's going to be a more comic performance or whether it's going to go for the more serious side of the lines. So I was fortunate because Aunt Maggie Faraway has both, has comedy and has imagination, etc. So in that first sort of 10 seconds, you realize how it's going to be because the audience gives you that.
I never thought of having that kind of significance when I'm sitting in the audience at a play.
Oh yes, you do. It's a collective thing. In fact, what's his name? Patrick Connolly, is it Patrick Connolly, has written about this, about what happens to an audience and how they manage to, and they do manage to impress upon the people on stage as to what's going to happen. For instance, I performed in Lovers, which we did at Lincoln Center back in 68, I think it was. And at one point, the presidential candidate of the time was coming to see the performance, but he was late. And so everybody was kept, they didn't tell the audience, that we were expecting him. And so people were getting very restless indeed. And so the first act, when it went up, he came in and they shifted a whole bunch of people out of their seats. I mean, which is an outrageous thing to do. But anyway, such is the power of the presidency. So he came in. And then when the lights went down, and then when the lights came up, they saw him, and there was a huge cheer. This was New York, and he had top boy in New York. So, but it meant that for that first play, it was two plays in one evening, called Lovers, Winners and Losers. And for Winners, which I was in, we could have, we could have done anything. We could have turned somersaults on the stage. They would never have laughed, never. And it was actually quite amusing. And the audience just withheld their reaction. And collectively, that can impress you very much,
I
you
can't
know.
even imagine. Eileen Heckert used to say that it drove her crazy that one episode of the Mary Tyler Moore Show that she guest starred in was seen by more people in one night than all of the Broadway performances she ever did. And when I think of one episode of some of your most popular TV shows like Lost or Star Trek or Law and Order SVU, that's got to be true for you too. So, how does it feel, Fionnula, to know that you may be most well known for projects that were not necessarily the most important work that you feel you've ever done?
Oh, well, the thing is that you never say to an audience member, that's not funny, or that's really serious. Because even though an audience member may laugh out loud at something, and it doesn't fall exactly where you've planned the laughs to be, that's their prerogative. That's why they're the audience, and that's why you're up on stage. That's the difference. You can learn from that, of course, but it's the audience is never wrong.
That's a good way to put it. You mentioned your dear husband, Dr. Garrett O'Connor, whom we sadly lost in 2015. He was a cousin of the actor Carroll O'Connor, and I understand you and Carroll collaborated on projects through the Institute for Innocence, which he created relating to healing and reconciliation within the Irish and Irish American communities. Did Carroll
Yeah.
O'Connor have an impact on your perspective of the Irish American culture?
Yes, well, I first met him when he was already a big star. He was a big, big star in All in the Family. Totally terrifying because I thought he's managed to collect, and he and the writers to collect all of the tiny, tiny things for that character and put them into one person. And it works and was very funny, as you know. People remember that. And even though he went on to do other work on stage and on screen, that was what he will best be remembered for bringing to the screen such an all-encompassing figure.
Yes, a figure that was very representative of a whole lot of attitudes in America. But when you
Yes.
look at the work that he did for the Irish and the Irish American communities, which wasn't really well known at the time, did he
No.
have a major influence on you?
Yes, he did. Only insofar as, for instance, I was very young, and I also was inexperienced in certainly in American television, and I admired what he did and what he could do. But I think he was not impressed by, certainly not by my politics, and so I had to leave it at that, and we better talk about something else.
Well, I will mention in 1996, you co starred with Helen Mirren in a very compelling movie called Some Mother's Son about the hunger strike by IRA prisoners in an Irish jail. You played Annie Higgins, the mother of one of the prisoners. I'm interested in knowing, Fionnula, about the emotional impact on you personally of being part of that very important movie.
Well, I'm glad to hear you say that it was an important movie. I've always thought so, and I've always thought that it really depicted the families of the hunger strikers, who were the people who bore the brunt of the protest, who stood on the side of the street with placards, etc., and who visited the jails and who visited the Houses of Parliament and tried against all barriers to get Margaret Thatcher, who was the prime minister in England at the time, to relent on them wearing their own clothes in jail. And that was the principal thing.
Well, I
Anyway,
thought it
yes,
was that they wanted to be seen as political prisoners, not criminals.
yes, that's right. In which case they would wear their own clothes, but they didn't have to wear a prison uniform. That was really, and at the time, part of the research that I did, I went into the Maze prison and I met some of the men who were there, and some of them I've stayed friendly with to even to today. I admire them so much. I admire that kind of courage. I don't think I could do it, to refuse food and starve myself. And then the dirty protest, which of course was shocking, sickening, and they were sickened by it. All of that. It was a hard time, and of course it's referred to as the Troubles, but in fact it was a war. That's really what it was, and war in the north of Ireland. And it was so strange when I would come back to Ireland during those years, and I would come back to the south to see my family in Dublin, and people didn't want to talk about the north. They didn't want to talk about it at all. They just wanted it to go away and fall into the sea or something. So it contributed. I think that contributed to the long drawn out and very difficult road to the peace process.
Oh, it absolutely did. And that movie sensitized the whole world, not only about the cause, but about the passion for the cause by those who were fighting it. You said some years ago in an interview that the image of Ireland is projected as a male image in the acting world and also in the world of literature. Do you still feel that way?
No, I think it's changing now. I mean, I think there are quite a number of female writers who are changing it, and there are female directors, thank God. so that they get to strut their stuff and a different viewpoint. But that's very recent. That's only sort of in the last 10 years, I would say. But when I first came on the scene, it was totally male dominated.
Yes, I mean, I think for a lot of people in North America, when they think of Ireland, they think of Angela's Ashes.
Yes, well, I knew the man who wrote that and his brother, and it's a brilliantly written and true account of a fairly true account of the poverty and the way people coped with that at that time, what I refer to as the grey 50s. But it was the grey 40s and 50s too. And even though Ireland was neutral during the Second World War, at the same time there was terrible poverty and unemployment. And except in the north they had shipbuilding and they could build ships in Harland and Wolff, and but in the south it was a very very new republic. 1939, was when the Irish Republic was formed, and so that was a new event.
In 2009, you were featured in an episode of an Irish TV show called Who Do You Think You Are? We learned about your parents' turbulent history in Ireland and about your father fighting in the Spanish Civil War. And you learned more about your grandmother, who was considered the rock of the family. What was the impact on you, Fionnula, of learning all of that family history?
Well, I had known about my father's history, from a very young age. And he used to say, my father would get tipsy and he would say to me, "Darling, someday you'll save Spain." And I thought, oh my God, what am I going to do? If I want to go into the theater, how am I going to save Spain? So I sort of put it on the back burner that I would do that in my spare time, save Spain. But I knew about his involvement in the Spanish Civil War and that he had gone, yes, he'd gone with Mr. Ryan to Spain and had fought in the International Brigade and was wounded. And I later met the ambulance driver who found him because he was just lying on the ground there where he had been shot, and he was wounded. And he and his sister, the ambulance driver's sister, she was a nurse, and they took him to a field hospital. And then 6 weeks later, or 8 weeks later, he was sent home to Ireland. But meantime, his family in Ireland, who were very religious, very Catholic, and they had run out and spent all their money on black clothes for mourning, and they thought he was dead because the BBC radio had announced that he was dead and missing believed dead. And they have never forgiven him, even though he's been dead for many years, but never forgiven him because he showed up 6 or 8 weeks later, fully alive.
And they wasted all that money.
They spent all the money on the mourning clothes, yes. But yes, I knew a lot of and then my grandfather was my mother's father was a teacher in the Loughlinstown, which isn't too far away from where I live now, in the poorhouse there. And he was in charge of the boys' school. And that always, I thought, if only he had known what I know now, but that was not to be. And his nephew was one of the leaders of the IRA in Shankill, and he was shot dead by the Black and Tans who raided a meeting that they were having, and he was 19 years of age. I mean, 19. And so they called for the funeral director to come and take the body away. And the funeral director happened to be his own father. Yes, his own father came with a horse and cart and took the body away. Yes,
Oh,
terrible
that's
times.
that's heartbreaking. They were terrible times. Well,
Yeah.
I don't know if you have saved Spain, but I'm sure you know, Fionnula, that your name is consistently included on the Irish Times list of Ireland's greatest film actors. How does that feel to be such a beloved ambassador of your country?
Well, I didn't know until this minute when you told me that my name appears there. That is, I'm sure I don't deserve it. I'm sure it's a mistake, you know. It's
It's
somebody else.
not, it's not a mistake. Look at, do I need to remind you again of all those credits that I mentioned in the introduction?
No, that's thank you very much.
You've had
I'll
such an incredibly exciting and diverse career. When you look back at your body of work, what would you say was the most personally satisfying project you were ever involved in?
Some mother's son rates up there very highly because the hunger strike, the fallout from the hunger strike is still felt today in those families and by everybody in the north of Ireland. And that was very meaningful for me. And also James Joyce's Women, because it took 10 years of my life to do that and write it and get Universal to give me the money to make it into a film. I mean, it was someday I'll write about that. It was hilarious.
I was going to ask you, now that you mentioned that, do you have any interest in writing a memoir?
I tend to tell the stories, favorite stories of mine that have happened. So I tend to tell them to friends, and you'd be my friend now, I tell you, but I don't I don't think of writing them down. I think one has to be very skillful to do that. My skill
I,
lies elsewhere.
all you have to do is tell those stories in front of a tape recorder and somebody else can write them down. But you have lived such a life. You've worked with so many incredible people on so many monumental projects. I have to tell you, it's been a great pleasure meeting you, Fionnula, and having this opportunity to chat with you about your life and your career. Thank you for all the great performances, and thank you especially so very much for taking the time to appear on our show.
Thank you so very much. Now, I really, I didn't know about your show until you got in touch with me, and now I won't miss it. I'll tune in every week.
I thank you so much. That means the world to me. And I really do feel like I made a new friend.
Yes, I feel that too. Thank you.
Our guest has been the iconic actress, Fionnula Flanagan. My name is Harvey Brownstone. Thank you all for joining us. See you next time. Thank you to my producers, Steve Silver, my managers, Rick Marcelli and Robin Bragg Marcelli of the Marcelli Company in Hollywood, my director of programming, Robert Monaghan, my editor, Isaiah Sheralampidis, and my entire team at the XPTV1 network in the UK.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to check out all the great interviews on the Harvey Brownstone Interviews YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell to be notified when new videos are posted.